Hello everyone and welcome back to another Babylonines match preview with myself today. West Ham versus Liverpool. Always a pretty tasty affair actually at the London Stadium, especially in recent seasons. Full of goals, full of action. Unfortunately, we were on the end of a battering last year. But a few seasons before that, obviously we got the 3-2 win when times were good for West Ham and we were fighting Liverpool at the top end of the table. However, now both teams are actually in the bottom half of the table and really trying to pick up with momentum with their season. And Liverpool just really not getting going and really struggling at the moment. So we're going to break down everything in this preview, how West Ham can look to exploit a very fragile Liverpool team, and also the dangers that West Ham need to be aware of from Liverpool's perspective, because they are still a team full of quality and talent across their ranks. So if you do enjoy, leave a like, subscribe to the channel. And as we always do, let's start with the overview of both clubs. So West Ham stats so far, we can see that we've picked up 11 points from expected of 10.86. So pretty much in line there. 15 goals scored compared to 12.20 expected. So slightly overperformed in that graphic. In terms of goals conceded, pretty much on par. So 25 goals conceded from an expected goals against of 24.78. The position is where it's slightly different. So we find ourselves just outside of the relegation zone now for the first time in a long time. But the expected data has us in 19th. When we look at Liverpool stats, again, they've had quite a similar season in terms of expected versus actual data. So 18 points so far with an expected points of 18.28. Goals scored of 18 with an expected goal scored of 21.50. So they've slightly underperformed in that regard. 20 goals conceded, which is one of the worst in the division, which we'll touch on shortly, and an expected goals conceded of 18.71. Again, one of the worst in the division so far in the Premier League. With the position, they find themselves in the bottom half in 12th position, which is crazy to think given their start to the season as well. And their expected position has them a few places higher in 8th. So we have to start with Liverpool right now. What is going wrong for Arne Slot and this Liverpool team? Because it's a team that recruited very heavily in terms of the financial backing that they had in the summer transfer window. And obviously big names like Trent left the club, but they tried to bring in different players. They brought in Kirkes, they brought in Frimpong, they've brought in Wirtz, they've brought in Isak, they've brought in Ekitike. So when you look at the talent that they've brought in, it's been a fantastic transfer window for them on paper. However, when you looked a little bit deeper into the squad, I don't personally think that they address the areas of their squad that they needed to. And sure, signing Wirtz, Isak, Ekitike, it's all fantastic additions to that front line, but you have to have a spine, you have to have a core to what you've got. And I just don't think Liverpool have that at the moment. Obviously, with Van Dijk and Konate, there is a dependence on them two to stay fit in that back four. That obviously Frimpong's been injured a little bit of this season. Kirkes just has struggled to adapt to how Liverpool play, and he hasn't really hit the ground running. He was one of the banker signings, really, given how well he played for Bournemouth after coming in from AZ Alkmaar, who West Ham fans will know very well. He played well against us when we played AZ Alkmaar, when he played up against Jared Bowen. So there's clearly a talented player there. It's just sometimes it takes a little bit getting used to, and that's not even considering the main event, which is Isak. Signed for such a big transfer fee in the summer, hasn't really kicked a ball much and hasn't really made an impact in a Liverpool shirt, which is slightly surprising, I would say. I think at the start, it was obvious that he would take a bit of time to get up to speed with a lack of match fitness, given what happened in the summer. But it's just not clicking. And that kind of encapsulates everything that is happening at Liverpool at the moment. It's just not clicking for them. And there are things that have happened, obviously, off the pitch, which will be affecting the squad. There's no two ways about that. You can't just ignore it because, what happened with Jota will be really difficult for any player in that Liverpool team to deal with this season. However, it's not the only reason. And from a tactical perspective, Arne Slot needs to be doing better. And as I mentioned, I just don't think they recruited well enough in terms of the positions that Liverpool needed. I can't believe they didn't go and get a DM to play as the 6 or another 8 in that midfield. I think that was a mistake. Obviously, they brought in Wirtz to be this luxury number 10, but sometimes it's not the luxury players that you need. I think Liverpool have shown that they've got the quality going forwards, and they didn't really need to make that signing if it was going to jeopardize other areas that they were going to go for in the market. If they could have brought in Wirtz, Isak, and also brought in these, maybe another really good centre-back. I know they were trying to get Mark Gahey over the line. I think that was a big miss. And a 6, then you're looking at it and saying, fine, you've addressed the spine. You can then afford to make these luxury signings. It's similar if West Ham did it. We know we need centre-backs and midfielders and defensive players, but we also need a striker. But if we went out and signed 3 or 4 strikers, it doesn't solve the issues we still have. So you have to look at the squad in balance. And I think that's a key aspect. Liverpool just lack balance at the moment across their team, and especially with the starting 11. And then you've got individual players like Mo Salah, who has dropped in performances from how he was performing last season. And to be honest, every other season, his level's been so high, it's inevitably going to drop off. But the drop off has been too steep from these key players. That includes Van Dijk, Salah, even players like Gakpo, who was playing well last season, hasn't really hit the ground running this season. So there's a few issues within that Liverpool team. And I think the biggest issues they have is lacking control in transitions, which unfortunately I don't think West Ham can exploit if we don't approach it in the correct way. We have players like Somerville, Bowen, but we don't have loads of pace or loads of players in abundance that can get us off the pitch. If Somerville's back fit for West Ham, that's going to be a massive, massive bonus. And it gives us a huge, huge chance of getting some points from this game, because I think Liverpool will be there for the taking. Going, from a defensive perspective, which we'll get onto shortly. But going forwards, we know Liverpool have talent. We cannot underestimate this game at all, because it's easy. It could easily get away from us. We could see ourselves losing 3 or 4-0 if we're not careful. So a level of pragmatism is going to be required from Nuno, but it can't jeopardize the whole plan. We can't just sit back defensively. Like the second half against Bournemouth, where we made those substitutions really early on, went defensive, tried to hold on to the 2-0 lead, and it backfired because we lost our transitional threat. We've got Paqueta back for this available as well. He was a big miss in that midfield. So I'm hoping we'll move away from the back 5 and into the back 4, which gives us a little bit more incentive to go forwards. But also on that left-hand side, I think we need Somerville there, because Guilherme just didn't perform against Bournemouth. I actually think Guilherme would perform better in this type of environment where the pitch is much bigger. It's not the conditions that Bournemouth away is. And he would just have a bit more freedom to play how he can do. But A, I don't think left wing is his best position. I think right wing is his best position. And B, Somerville has looked good in the last couple of games before he picked up that minor injury. So hopefully Somerville will be back. And I'm filming this before Nuno's done his pre-match press conference. But there is opportunities for West Ham to hit this Liverpool team on the break. I mean, if anyone watched a Liverpool game last night, or Wednesday night when this goes out, against PSV, they looked extremely vulnerable to transitions. And I know at the end, of course, they sacrificed some of their defensive assets and went for it with the attacking players they brought on, and they rolled the dice at times. But they lacked control throughout that 90 minutes, and they have done this season. They haven't really gained control. And even when they were winning at the early stages of this season, it was always a last-minute goal. It was always just getting over the line, which, to be honest, transferred from last season. They played so well in the league, which got them in such a strong position it got them the title in the end. But they were dropping off. They were scraping past in that second half of the season, especially after February, March time. They were getting by. And even West Ham, when we went to Anfield, we equalised right at the end, and then Liverpool go and score again in the 90th minute. And that's the sort of, not luck, because you make your own luck, but that's the sort of, that's the difference between winning a title and being in 12th position right now in the league. Those are the fine margins in Premier League football because of the standard across the teams now. So let's have a look at Liverpool's season in a bit more detail behind the stats and whether it's deserved where they are. So they have the 9th strongest defensive record in the Premier League so far with 18 goals scored. So still relatively good there. And they've got the 7th strongest expected offensive record with 21.50 expected goals scored. So going forwards, they're still relatively good compared to the rest of the league. However, defensively, they have been really, really poor. You can see it here. They've got the 5th worst defensive record in the Premier League. They've got the 5th worst expected defensive record in the Premier League as well. So again, it's not like they've conceded goals that they shouldn't have. They are conceding goals for how they should. And you can see there, they're averaging 1.5 goals per game with an XG of 1.61. They're averaging 1.67 goals conceded per game with an expected goals against of 1.27. And they're averaging 61% possession in the Premier League. So I think it's very clear to anyone that is a neutral West Ham fan, Liverpool fan, who's going to watch this game, how the pattern of this is going to emerge. Whether we play a back 5 or a back 4, I think Nuno will go back into a back 4, because obviously we played that against Newcastle, we played that against Burnley, got 2 wins, changed to the back 5 because of personnel with Paqueta being out, which I didn't disagree with at the time. And now we're seeing us go back into a back 4, hopefully with Paqueta's suspension finished. And again, as I mentioned, hopefully Somerville is out on the left-hand side. But when we're talking about how this match is going to be stylistically, we know we're going to sit in. We know we're probably going to have between 20 and 30% possession, and Liverpool are going to dominate. But we almost have to, at times, entice Liverpool in to hit them on the break. But that's where if Somerville isn't fit, I do have a concern for West Ham in transition because Wilson isn't an in transition striker. Bowen can do it, but he shouldn't be relied upon. And I think too often this season, he is now becoming relied upon to do that if someone like Somerville isn't playing. And then you're asking a lot of Fernandes in that midfield to drive up and down the pitch. And look, he can do that. But we have to pick our moments in this game because both Juve and Wan-Bissaka can help us there on the overloads, on the overlaps, because they've both got engines. They can run up and down for 90 minutes, no problem. And then you've got Fernandes, who needs to be the connector, and Paqueta needs to be the one that just sits a little bit deeper in this game, dictates play, finds spaces like he can do. But I wouldn't want Paqueta playing too far forwards in this game. I would have him almost sitting in parallel with Fernandes, with Potts as the DM, and Fernandes almost given the license to drive forwards. And when we drive forwards with Fernandes, Paqueta just needs to sit in. He just needs to sit in that midfield with Potts, maybe a little bit further than Potts, but we need to always have two in that midfield and only one person going forwards in that midfield. Otherwise, Liverpool do have the ability to transition back because they have so much pace, they have so much power in that front line with the likes of Salah, with the likes of Isak, Ekitike. These are very good players that will hurt us in transitions if we're not careful and if we're not ready to pounce back on the counter-attack of our counter-attack. So in terms of Liverpool, I think they will be looking at this game as one to get their season back on track. I know they probably would have said the same against PSV in the week, but we cannot underestimate this game. We cannot go into this game thinking that we're just going to turn up and beat a Liverpool team because they haven't been good. That is not how it works. They are a team full of quality. They could easily go and win 9 games in a row from the back of this because of the quality they have within their squad. But I do think there are issues that we can get at. I think that not bringing in a 6 is a big problem for them. I just don't think at times, if they're playing McAllister in that midfield, I think sometimes they do lack that physical engine. I think Szoboszlai has been one of Liverpool's better players, and I really like him as a footballer because he's got such a good engine. He can, cross from right, he can cross from left, he can score goals, he offers a threat from set pieces, and defensively he's good in transition as well. So he's someone that is going to be the engine for Liverpool in that midfield. And then you've got people like Gravenberch and Curtis Jones, who even played right back. So they do have players that can play like that, but there are fragilities as well. I think if McAllister plays in that midfield, we know he can be a threat if Liverpool, are pushing West Ham and pinning us back in our own half on our own 18-yard box. He is then a threat because he can pick out a pass, he can score from long, he can play those passes in behind the West Ham fullbacks. So that's something we can't allow to happen. So if we're going to sit very passively, if McAllister is playing in that midfield, we can't allow him the time on the ball because he's the one that will pick those passes. But there is an element of, okay, if he is playing, we can pick our moments because we can get past him in transition with Fernandes, with our fullbacks, with Bowen, Somerville, etc. So it's a really interesting one. It's definitely going to be a lot closer than maybe we would have predicted 3 or 4 weeks ago. But that's not to say that this is going to be an easy game for West Ham or Liverpool. I think it's going to be quite a quietly difficult game for both because of the styles and because of how we're going to play. And we're going to try and frustrate Liverpool. But this could all change. We could concede in 4 minutes and then the plan's completely out the window and then the gaps appear. And then it's really, really difficult for West Ham to get back in. West Ham could score. And then, again, it makes it really, really difficult for Liverpool to get back into it. So it's such a cliche, but that first goal is going to be massively important on Sunday against Liverpool. We have to get that first goal. Otherwise, we are going to find ourselves, it's going to be very difficult to get back into that game. But in terms of how Liverpool play, obviously we've looked at this in a bit more detail, but they've played a 4-2-3-1 or a 4-3-3 in 77% of their games. So that's how they're going to play. And they may switch to a 4-4-2 or, something a bit more attacking if they're chasing the game. But we can see there's going to be a 4-2-3-1 or a 4-3-3. In terms of suspensions and stuff, I think Wirtz is going to be injured for this game. Just looking at the sheet now. Leone, a centre-back, obviously he did his ACL and he was looking quite promising as a young centre-back, so that's a shame. Connor Bradley looks like he's not going to be able to make it as well. Frimpong, as I mentioned, he's out. And then you've got Alisson Becker, who's been injured, but it looks like he might be ready back to come in goal, which is a big plus for Liverpool if he is fit for this game because he makes such a difference to how they are defensively. And Ekitike, I'd expect him to be match fit as well. So they do have a couple of injuries, but I think Alisson coming back would be a big one for them. But we know with West Ham, we've got a couple of injuries. Obviously, Fabianski, who sometimes I forget is actually signed back on for West Ham. He's got his back injury. And Somerville's going to be touch and go. So we'll have to see how that goes. But by and large, our squad is relatively okay at the moment. Obviously, Mavropanos is injured, but we've been playing with Kilman and Todibo anyway, or Igor. And that kind of leads me on to our predicted 11. I think this is how we'll set up. I think this is dependent on if Somerville is fit. If Somerville isn't fit, I think he will try and shoehorn Paqueta into the left and bring in either someone like Souček or Magassa into the midfield. I don't think he'll trust Guilherme to play again, to be honest, on that left-hand side. But I can see West Ham lining like this. I think it'll be a back four. I think we'll see Potts, Fernandes, Paqueta reinstated into that midfield with a front three of Somerville, Bowen, and Wilson if Somerville is fit to play. And then I think the back five at the moment chooses itself unless Nuno saw enough from Igor in that game against Bournemouth to start him over someone like Kilman, but I don't anticipate him doing that. So it's going to be a tough game, but it's an exciting game. Obviously, West Ham won back-to-back home Premier League games just before the international break. We've gone away and somehow nicked a point at Bournemouth. So we're on paper in pretty good form. So can we make it 3 wins from 3 at home in the Premier League? That is a big ask, but it's a question I'm looking forward to seeing the answer to on Sunday. Hopefully it is yes. And we come away from that with a victory, and it would be massive 3 points, not just because we're beating Liverpool, but we have some very tough fixtures, and this is one of them. And throughout December now, we've got some really, really tough games coming up. You know, like some Man United, Man City, Brighton, some really tough encounters. So we can't just, not get points because it's a tough game. We have to try and get the points because otherwise we'll slip back into that relegation zone. It's so tight down there. We need to try and create some distance between us and that bottom 3. But in terms of my predictions, I can see it being a draw, a 2-2 draw. I hope we have enough. I can also see us winning at 2-1 or 3-1 just because of how Liverpool are playing, but it could equally go the other way. But I do think there will be goals in this. I'll go with 2-2 again, just because defensively I can't back us to keep a clean sheet. And I think Liverpool have enough firepower to always score and cause problems. However, defensively, I feel like there are fragilities in that Liverpool defence that we can get at. And I think we will get at, especially at the London Stadium with our fans behind us as well. So I'll go 2-2. Hopefully we do enough to get something like 2-1 or 3-1, but I do think it will be 2-2. And to be honest, a draw would still be a very good point. So I wouldn't be too disheartened at a 2-2 draw. But let me know down below in the comments, what do you think? What's your score prediction for this game against Liverpool? How would you like Nuno to line up with his starting 11? Would you bring Souček in? Would you bring Paqueta back in? Would Somerville come back in for you if he's fit? And would you keep Kilman at the back or bring in Igor? Big questions that we'll have answers to on Sunday from Nuno. But I want to hear what you have to say. So let me know down below in the comments. Leave a like on the video if you have enjoyed it, as it massively helps us out. Subscribe to the channel. And until next one, come on you irons.